I guess the first thing I want to ask is that because so much has changed, I would say in the last couple of years of how you first got into more or less the industry, if you will, and as far as the podcast is concerned, and you've talked about how your perception was and how things came to be and how people's opinions of you at the time was one thing, and then once the show had progressed along the way, as more people became aware about what you were really about. Obviously, you still get some critiques out there here and there from people that get right. So, but what I'm actually curious about is how I guess the question I really want to ask is how you have felt for yourself. What has changed about you the most since you first have started into where you are at now? Because I believe that from what I've heard before, even with the times you've talked with Brim and everyone else you've had on the show, and the various shows you've had, you have, I meant to say, it seems like you develop some sort of callous with the critiques, but I'm actually really curious about how you feel like, as far as yourself is concerned, if you feel like you've gotten better as a result of those amount of critiques that you get, and the various people who question you about what you've done, how you've done things, because again, it's a repetitive process. So I wonder how much of you about yourself has changed along the way that you may think you become a better person as a result of going through that train, if you will.
You know, back whenever I first started the show, I was just starting to really come into myself, I guess. I think, you go through your 20s and you're a shit show. You don't know what the hell is going on in your life. You're still trying to figure out who you are and everything else. And then you get into your 30s and you kind of have a better handle on who you might be, but you're still really afraid of what people think of you. You're still really afraid of the judgments that you're getting from other people or what they're saying about you. And I think what changed for me the most is I started recognizing that people judging me was a reflection of their own bullshit. And people can say it all the time. They can tell you until they're blue in the damn face that, oh, it's just a reflection of them. They're just projecting onto you. And But until you actually go into your mind and accept that and recognize it, it doesn't change anything. So I think there was a lot of accepting that somebody coming on to my social media and saying, you're not a trophy wife or, whatever it was, I was able to then realize like, oh, that person has some shit going on in their life. Like, I kind of want to give them a virtual hug almost and be like, yo, you don't have to attack other people to make yourself feel better.
Right.
But that's what a lot of people do. That's what social media is. And again, I can go on the defense and be like, fuck you, you don't know me, but what good is that going to cause? All it's going to do is make me frustrated. And then we're going to have an interaction back and forth. I'm not going to feel good at the end of it. So now I just block and move on with my life, because do I really give a shit about their opinions? No, I don't. I mean, sure, you have those certain people that you value what they have to say. But if you're not in that tiny little circle of people that I consider to be close and have my best interest at heart, then it's not really something that I need to then deal with.
Well, so that's interesting for me because this is the part where I'm actually curious about how you look at things slightly more different, because this is basically a business now for you as well.
Yes.
So you have a brand that you are building here, and from my perspective here, it looks like things are moving along rather smoothly. Well, I wouldn't say smoothly, but rather productively here for you, right?
Yeah.
So because the critiques that I'm actually more leaning towards with you is more about, yes, it's one thing for, as you mentioned before, about people who are criticizing by the way you look or how you present yourself. That stuff, that part I understand with where you're referring to, but I think what I'm referring to is more about critiques that you are having to deal with where it could actually affect your business, where if you're getting a landslide of critics, including those trolls out there who are just saying mean things to you, and to some degree that would have an effect on more or less the brand. I'm not saying you're getting a landslide of critiques that people are down
right.
but to some degree, where if someone is looking at your, let's say, because social media is a big thing you just touched upon here, if someone is saying, we want to work with you, but we notice on social media you're getting all these hits where people are saying these things about you, is that the general perception about how you are being perceived? Because if that's the case here, we need something's got to change because we're a little hesitant about not wanting to work with you. And I'm not saying it's like that with you, but if it were to be like that, if is that a concern that could be something that you would be?
Not even a little bit. I absolutely refuse to not be myself. And I don't care if you're offering me $1 million, if you're offering me $10 million, if you're offering me, the Manscaped deal or whatever. I don't give a shit. I tell people straight from the get-go, I am cussy. I like my wine. I say fuck a lot. If you don't like it, you can go fuck yourself. You don't have to work with me, because I spent so much of my life trapped in this little box of people telling me how I should be. I had my mother and my sister shushing me in restaurants because I was too loud or too vulgar or too this and too that. And now I'm like, well, now I have not one, but 2 successful ass shows with my vulgar, loud ass mouth. So I won't ever let anybody trap me into not being myself ever again in my entire life. What you see is what you get. And if you don't want to work with it, I totally understand. That's on you. I don't mind. Fact of the matter is, I use my platforms. I use both of the shows as my own way of reaching people, identifying with people. And I don't do it for the money. I got enough money, as much as I like to joke that I'm the trophy wife, my husband makes a lot of money. I'm good. I don't need your money. I refuse to change who I am or mold myself into like a more appropriate version of myself for somebody else. If I do it because I want to do it, if I'm like, oh, I've all of a sudden decided that I hate F-bombs, then that's one thing. But I'm not that way. And I just don't see the point in kind of compromising myself for somebody else when the only person that I really should give a shit about is me and what I think.
So there's something you mentioned before, and I forgot what show it was that you were doing, but you had talked about how sometimes you'll have a guest on the show that may be a little conservative about the way they speak. So, like, hey, can you not cuss as much? And you have a little, you're not saying you're not going to want to do it to appease them, but you're doing it just out of respect, just to be cordial with them in this scenario. But here's the thing about that, because I'm actually really curious, because you said about, you are who you are, and if they don't like you, it is what it is. But under those circumstances, does that same mindset apply there too, or is it more about making an adjustment just to make the guest comfortable, so that way, when they have a conversation with you, their perception of you can be that she was really respectful about my wishes and I like her for that? Or is it just more about just because it's protocol, if you will, for what those reasons may be?
See, even whenever I have guests on the show, that like there was one guest, her name is whatever, Amy. She is awesome. I adore her. She doesn't like to cuss, which is fine, but she knows that I'm cussy. So it was never a matter of, oh, I need to tone it down for somebody, because I don't really tone it down. I am respectful of other people, but my whole appeal is, if you don't want to cuss, don't. I'm not trying to, I want whoever comes onto my show or whoever I'm interacting with to be their authentic selves. And then I'm going to also be mine. And I don't think that I'm being disrespectful by being who I am. And I don't want somebody else to not be who they are, for me. So I don't really tone it down a whole lot. I mean, I still, even in that show that I did with whatever, Amy, I was still dropping some F-bombs. In fact, somebody commented on that YouTube video, because they must have been one of her fans. They were like, too many F-bombs, but great show. And I was like, okay, so they followed her and watched it. But you know what? They enjoyed it. They might not think that I might not be their cup of tea, and that's okay. I feel like a toned down version of Chelsea Handler, right? Like, I'm not quite as aggressive or in your face with some things, but I still am not going to kind of compromise myself, even whenever somebody else comes on. I'm not going to be disrespectful and go out of my way to do, anything that makes them uncomfortable. But I'm also not going to tone down my own light.
You said something before about just now where you talked about how you don't need the money because one, you have your husband who makes good money for you to be able to do the things as you please and move at your pace, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's actually interesting because you said that the first thing that pops in my mind is, and I hope it's a fair question to ask, but what would you do if, let's say, things are rough where your husband says I lost the job, I don't have anything, we're not going to have the income that we had before, for you to be able to do the things you do at your pace. Under those circumstances, how do you think you would prepare for something like that? I'm not saying it's going to happen, obviously, but if it were to happen, how do you think you would handle that for yourself to deal with that hardship that you have not dealt with in that respect, because you've had a base that helped you be able to focus on the things you want to focus on at your own pace?
If my husband came to me and said, like, yo, we are struggling, like something needs to give, so I would be right back in my old office doing the escrow work that I've done for,
Okay.
a decade before that. I have like a background in this thing that I was really good at and I actually really liked. But
Okay.
when my babies were born, my husband was like, well, you don't have to work anymore. You can stay home with your babies. And I was like, all right, I'm in. That's what I'm doing. But, like if he were to come to me and say, ugh, we have some problems here, or let's say he gets injured on the job. I mean, knock on wood that he doesn't, but it's, he has a dangerous job. And so, if something like that were to happen, at least I know that I have that thing to fall back on. And again, that's, not something that I really have to compromise myself with.
Okay. So now here's the thing that I'm curious about with you when it comes to, because I'm actually really I'm so glad you decided to speak with me, because one of the things that I actually loved about what you do here is that you talked before about how open you are here, but the things that I wanted to ask you were things that I've never really had the opportunity to ask anybody else, that I'm hoping that you can answer here for me.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the fact that, because for example, you have talked to, actually I happened to see that episode where you talked with whatever Amy. I did check out that episode, and you both
Yeah.
had talked about the work you guys had done on yourselves. But the thing I was really curious about with you is that because you seem pretty open to the idea even at that time, but I'm wondering if anything has changed for you along the way, despite the fact that there is sort of an upkeep to certain things you would need to do. But when has anything changed for you along the way about how you look at yourself because of the work you've done on yourself? Maybe at some points you may feel like this is a little too much, or maybe the thought process I had before was good at the time, but now that time have gone by, my perception changed a little bit, where maybe I might approach a little bit more, not hesitantly, but a little bit more carefully, if you will. So I'm wondering if something like that would change for you along the way in that respect.
I have learned to be a lot more patient with myself, especially over the last year or so. I think patience has always been one of my big challenges.
Yeah.
I am the kind of person that wants what she wants and I want it yesterday. If I'm starting something new, I want it to have taken off yesterday. I have a hard time waiting for the results to roll in, or, even building a show. It's very, very hard to gain your audience over time. There's so many choices out there for people to consume content, and getting yourself out there in front of people and being like, please come and listen to my content.
Right.
So I've learned a lot of patience. I've learned also to expect that good things are going to happen for you, and to not second guess myself so much. And again, this is like new for me. It's practicing what I'm preaching, and really I've really gotten into meditation lately, and um trying to remind myself that if I, like, let's say I have a shitty episode and I hate it, or I tweet something and I get flack for it, or whatever it may be, before I might have really beat myself up over it. Now I'll beat myself up over it for 15 minutes. And then I'm like, all right, fucking let's move on. Like you have to forgive yourself and move on for whatever, or try again tomorrow. If I wake up and I am in a terrible ass mood and I just am cranky with the kids or cranky with my husband, or I don't want to be bothered, I'm really open about it to my kids and to my husband. I have some, past things that have happened to me where there are times now that my husband will reach over and like want to rub my shoulder, but I'm in a space where I'm like, oh, I can't be touched right now. And I'll have to look at him and say, honey, I'm sorry. I can't be touched right now. And for him to look at me and be respectful of that and be like, okay, and then there's other times where I would like crawl inside his skin to be closer to him, And I do it with my kids too. I tell them like, listen, I am having a day. It's a bad one. I am struggling. Like I'm going to need some space. And I think it's good for me to be more patient and aware with myself, because then I'm able to pass along that information to the people that I'm surrounded by and say, hey, look, not the best version of myself right now. I'm going to try again tomorrow. But right now I'm going to need you to respect some boundaries.
So here's something that you said just now, where I'm actually curious about where you learned that about yourself, because I think you may have talked about it before on more than one occasion, but because I don't remember, so I'm hoping you don't mind me asking here. But so the developing the patience about putting the show together, talking with your family, and because the thing is that the thing that I've come across with your shows that you've done, in every episode that I've come across here so far, you have a pretty consistent personality as far as how you present yourself. But the one thing that actually crossed my mind, I forgot which episode it was that you did with Brim. I don't remember. I think it might have been one of the recent ones you did. But I remember it dawned on me because I wanted to ask you this here was, what happens if you're having a shitty day? I'm not, and I hope it doesn't come across when I asked you, but when you're presenting yourself that way, is it hard for you to do that, to not give the bad impression that I'm having a shitty day, but I got to put on this, I got to do the show, so I got to make the best out of it? Because I'm curious about how you go about doing that when you're having a really bad day, but you have a show to do that day, or maybe two shows to do that day, where you have to keep that momentum going for the show.
The show is really a reprieve for me.
Okay.
Even when I'm having a really shitty day, the thing is, you can have a shitty day and still be a good version of yourself. Like, I don't have to be a dick to people just because I'm having a bad day. Maybe I'm not as funny that day. Maybe I'm not as on that day. And, we deal with that as it goes on. But even when things aren't going great, or things are hard that day, or I'm depressed about something, or maybe I'm getting my period, or who the fuck knows, whatever it happens to be, doesn't mean that I gotta take it out on somebody else. And there are definite times, like if you talk to Brim, he'll tell you, him and we have like our weekly bitch session with each other before we even start recording. He gets on and I'm like, what's up? How's your week? And we're either like, oh, this was so awesome, everything was, but we're on for like an hour and a half talking with each other and kind of being each other's therapist before we even hit the record button. So by the time we hit record, we've already worked out some shit that was bothering us before, or, maybe it wasn't nothing was bothering us, but we're just like catching up on our week, or maybe even he has something exciting going on, or we're talking about ideas that, we want to do with the show. But we've already had an hour and a half of like going back and forth and kind of cheering each other up before the record button even gets hit.
Interesting. That's actually nice. Nice answer you gave there. So talking about episodes here, because you mentioned before about having, having a shitty episode. To you, what would be considered a shitty episode that you would feel that have that sentiment towards that?
Yeah, there's actually one episode whenever I was doing that trophy wife life and I was doing interviews with people, there was a guy that had reached out to me and he said, I wrote this parenting book. Let me send you a copy. Would you like to have me on your show? And I was like, sure. Set it all up. The night before, I'm doing my research. I'm looking this guy up. I'm figuring out what questions I want to ask him. Or I don't like to write actual questions. I do an outline of,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get my outline together on what we might discuss, different topics. And as I'm reviewing his information, I'm realizing that he doesn't mention having kids anywhere, not in his bio of his own damn book. All he talks about is being a principal of a school and like a martial arts guy, and doesn't say anything about kids. And I actually said to Bram, I'm like, dude, I think I'm about to interview some guy on a parenting book, and I don't even think he has kids. Now, to this day, I am not sure whether or not he has children or not.
Did you ever ask him?
I didn't ask him. I let him go. I stopped the interview at 15 minutes. I was like, all right, well, thank you for coming on. Bye. Because he started to get really religious, and then he started to shame masturbation. And I was like, and I'm out. I'm sorry. I have teenage boys. We live in a world where people are fucking themselves left and right. Like, you have lost me with masturbation shaming. I host a show called The Dirty Little Secrets Club. So yeah, I cut that interview short. He reached out to me maybe 2 months later, like, hey, is this episode coming out? And I ghosted him. I kind of feel bad now. I wish I would have had the balls to be like, yo, you were just not what I was looking for, or it just wasn't a great fit. But I got scared and I ghosted him.
Do you still have that episode in the file somewhere?
I'm sure that I do. It's in my Zoom link somewhere, probably.
Okay.
But I was like, oh, this one will never see the light of day. Never, ever, ever.
So, but what about episodes you've done, you've uploaded, but maybe you've already done it and you're editing and you realize, this is not going to be very good. Did you ever have those moments for yourself?
There are moments where I'm definitely harder on myself.
Mm-hmm.
There was one episode in particular that I was just like, wasn't a huge fan of the guest. I didn't dislike the guest. The content that was being brought, I was like, it was just, I don't know. It kind of felt like punching down a little to me. And so I was like, I just don't know if I really love this. But I did upload it. The thing is, I'm really hard on myself all the time, every episode. And every time my husband laughs at me because I'll walk down the steps and I'll be like, it was fine. And he's like, okay, so it's going to be really good then, because every time you walk down the steps and say, it was fine, it ends up being like really good. And so that's another thing of learning to not be so hard on myself and to have more patience, because even the times where maybe I think of 10 other jokes that I could have said or added this or done this or whatever, I'm still good enough. And that's sometimes a hard thing for people to accept about themselves, is even whenever you think you're not great, you're still good enough. And I still had my listeners, and I still had the compliments, and people were still writing to me their stories or giving me their feedback. And it was never like, wow, Dayna, that one really sucked, So I think that I have definitely learned that, even at what I perceive to be my worst, it's still good enough.
Do you ever go back and revisit the episodes you've done? I mean, apart from you having to edit and put it together yourself, which is standard, but I'm talking about like after the fact. Do you ever go back and revisit? Let me see how this episode was, because maybe your perception changed about how you looked at yourself, and you said, maybe I thought it was horrible, but maybe you'll go back and look at it, you may look at yourself more differently because you thought you probably didn't think so highly of yourself at that moment, but then looking back at it, you might think I was actually not that bad. Because I've had those moments for myself too, but I'm wondering if you've ever had that, because you do more than one show. So I'm not sure how you go about and reflect on those things, and if you take the time to go back and revisit them as well.
I don't go back too often to revisit. However, I have a viewing party. That's a viewing party.
Okay.
The night before my episode goes out, my husband and I sit on our couch with a glass of wine and watch the whole episode. And it's usually then that I am like, oh, okay. So I do watch every episode with my husband before it even makes it to any of the platforms. And that's usually the time where, because I can listen to my husband when he's laughing in real time because it's the first time that he saw it.
Right.
And then he'll give me his feedback too. He'll be like, oh, I really liked that, you said this, or, oh my gosh, whenever you did this story, or, your guest was really interesting. I liked their insight with this. So it's kind of cool that I can sit there and get feedback in real time before I even let the episode go out. I kind of get the feeling. It's like going to a movie premiere, for yourself.
You kind of get a general consensus about what to expect.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever consider doing that to bring someone else in there to show the episode before it airs or before it drops on the channel or on the platforms you have for the podcast, and see what their opinions on the matter is outside of your husband?
The only other person that has had the preview experience, his name is AJ. He's one half of Dad Fiction. I don't know if you know them on Twitter. They had a show going for a few years, I think, and they just ended their show maybe a month ago. Okay. And AJ reached out to me 3 years ago now, I think, and invited me onto Dad Fiction. And it just so happened that they lived in my area. So I went and hung out with them. And then I ended up becoming really good friends with them. So AJ was coming to my house and hanging out. And on one of the nights that he was coming over to hang out with me and my husband, I was like, it's Sunday night. We ready for wine and preview night? And so AJ actually sat and watched with us. And that was really fun to see his reaction, because he's one of the funniest guys I've ever met in my life. And so the fact that I was able to make him laugh, and he's the son of a comedian, like his dad does stand-up comedy all around. And so the fact that I was able to watch him laugh at our episode and get great feedback from him actually meant a lot to me.
Interesting. So when you go, once you have the episodes dropped, do you still get a little nervous about how people will react to it? Because I would imagine when you first started, the anticipation is different from what the anticipation is now, from when, for the amount of time you've done this here. So do you have a little bit of a different set of nerves that you never noticed before that are noticeable now, where you realize, okay, so these things now that I'm concerned about here, I have to see where this all comes from, because I got to either you're nervous about how, because you're gaining traction and something maybe the numbers may have dropped a little bit and you're concerned, oh my God, what happens here? What do I have to do to bring those back up again? So I'm curious about how you progress from that and how you handle that moving forward when you started noticing the little things that weren't a concern for you before, however far back you started here.
Yeah, I used to be very concerned about how people perceived the episode, what they thought. And I would get really nervous dropping the episode, and I would just wait. It would just be waiting. Okay, how many people are listening? Okay, who's reviewing the episode? Who's giving me feedback on it? Who's what did you guys think? I'm not so much that way anymore, though. Okay. I love the feedback. The only time in the last so long that I got nervous was when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And Brimstone and I talked about it, and we don't get political on our show typically. Yeah,
I've heard that episode. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So we talked about it on that one. And then also Samantha and I talked about it on Where's Our Participation Trophy. And I'm typically not a political person. I definitely have my political views.
Right.
I don't usually go into them because I don't want to divide people. But when that happened, I really felt strongly that I have a platform and I have a belief. And I felt that the overturning of that was disgusting and dangerous. And so being able to use my platform for that, I wasn't sure how people were going to react, because I know that some of my listeners don't always agree with me. I think that we handled it well in a way that we were we aren't trying to disrespect anybody and their beliefs, but you need to also recognize that your beliefs are not my beliefs and your God may not be my God. And so there was a whole thing that we had gotten into with that Minimally, we got into it. I was nervous about putting that out there because I was afraid that I don't know what I was afraid of. That's what my
retaliation,
3
probably.
people were going to be like, you suck. We hate you now because, you don't love my Jesus. But we put the episode out, and we actually ended up with so many more people giving us great feedback and like, thank you for standing up for this. Thank you for using your platform. And I was like, okay, you know what? The one guy that had shit to say, I ignored. And, the 20 people that were like, thank you for doing this. I was like, okay, I'm going to hold on to those. I'm going to hold on to the good stuff. And this guy over here that doesn't agree with me, he can go over into his corner and like troll somebody else. I'm going to hang on to the good stuff.
So what about when it comes to the guests you have on the show? Because the thing, because you talked about before, and even on the show that because just now you mentioned that you don't try to delve into religion and politics for just to keep everything smooth in that respect. But do you ever consider bringing a guest that may have an opposing view as yourself, where you would think that maybe this conversation would be a good one to have on the show because I could understand that person's perspective and see where they're coming from? Hopefully that would open up more, not say opportunities, but more of a discussion about, because you don't do these things, maybe this will hopefully bring more awareness about these subject matters that you don't want to get into here for obvious reasons, but hopefully be able to, I wouldn't say elevate the show, but maybe just create something different that is unique for your show to allow that opposition to be able to have that discussion.
I wish that I could, but if I'm being honest, I have yet to find a person that doesn't want to attack and wants to have a conversation.
Okay.
So if there was a person out there that is willing to, share their beliefs without shoving God down my throat. That's the part that I'm like, okay, I get it. You believe this thing because of your religion. What about the other people that don't have that religion?
Right.
So I have really struggled with finding a person that is able to have a conversation, and not attack based on their religion. So that's something that we've wanted to do. And it's very difficult to, unfortunately, have that conversation with people. It kind of sucks because you like to think that, your neighbor, your friend, your coworker, your cousin, your aunt at Christmas, whatever, you would like to think that you can still love each other and have differences of opinions.
Right.
And unfortunately, our world is so divided right now. And that is something that, like, my older brother, I love my older brother so much. We're very different when it comes to politics and religion. And he's always trying to start a fight with me. Always. Anytime he's texting me, it's something political. It's something and I'm like, oh my God. And so finally I text him back and I said, listen, big brother, I love you. And I'm not going to do this with you. Like, I understand that you view things a certain way. That doesn't, like, we are not going to change each other's minds here. Let's talk about the weather. Yeah. Let's talk about the kids. Let's talk about, the new car that you bought or, vacation, anything but politics.
I don't mean to diverge from this, but when you said yeah, for some reason I thought of, because I know you're from Pittsburgh. I thought that was more of your Pittsburgh accent kind of come out there a little bit. So I don't mean to distract that from the subject matter here. Yeah. But when you said that, I was like, oh, there's that Pittsburgh accent sliding out there. Okay.
It sneaks out every now and again.
Yeah. But okay. Well, here. So this I understand that perspective, but because you're having a hard time finding someone that you can have a conversation with. But have you ever considered? I'm not going to say, just find anyone that can just talk with you, but finding someone that it's not going to have the same approach as far as, and I'm not saying like not do it calmly. Maybe they will do it calmly, but they're very adamant about their beliefs. And if you're challenging them, they're going to challenge right back, but in a way that probably would, who knows how it's going to turn out, but you take it on faith that you think, all right, if it goes down this route where we're just going to start clashing, how would I handle that for myself to make sure the conversation doesn't go off the rails, or at least to the best of my ability to keep things in line. But knowing full and well that this person could start saying some stuff that I am not going to agree with here. But to me, those are the more interesting. I'm not saying the conversations that don't have those elevated, emotions, if you will, aren't interesting at all. That's not what I'm getting at. But if a conversation does get to that level where you have those oppositions just clashing with each other, don't you think that would actually help out in making the conversation more interesting, where you can really see the person through the thick and thin? And then maybe towards the end of the conversation, you might come out of it and say, you know what, we were at war with each other, but I don't like what you said, but I respect you for what you said and hear me out. And therefore I can hear you out. Like, do you ever think about there could be a possibility where you could have that type of conversation without having to find somebody that's going to be level-headed as yourself to keep that conversation going?
No, my show is, I do it for entertainment value. If I had a politically aligned show or, something like that, then yes, absolutely. I would want to have those people that were opposite of me. But because my shows basically, one focuses on dirty little secrets that people anonymously submit, and the other one focuses on comedy, dating, momming, millennial shit. So I don't find that I need to kind of stir the pot with that because our shows aren't, people aren't coming to listen to Where's Our Participation Trophy to, find out what who I'm voting for president, They come because we have funny content and it gives them a break from, at the start of their week, they can, kick it off with a laugh. So no, I don't think that we'll probably bring anybody on that we want to go blows with politically or otherwise.
So when you look for guests, I guess let me go back from the beginning with you, because when you started with the show, because I didn't go that far back with the episodes here, but so I hope you don't mind me asking this question, where did you have trouble finding guests that you could speak with on the various matters you want to get into, within the confines of the show? Was it hard for you in the beginning to do that? And then if you were finding somebody, having them be committed to it and then being able to have a conversation that would be interesting for the show, interesting for yourselves? Or was it pretty easy from the very beginning to find a guest because various people that could come on and converse about a number of different things to keep the show more or less entertaining? Like, what was that like in the beginning for you when you first started?
It was a little daunting at times because you had to come up with a different person every single week to bring onto the show. And, sometimes there's emergencies, sometimes there's flaky people, sometimes they're not all that interesting. But I didn't find it very difficult. I had a lot of people actually reaching out to me and saying, hey, can I come on your show? And it ended up kind of at the point where I was cherry picking who I wanted, because I had a lot of people interested in coming onto the show. And I would be like, oh, there was a girl that went to bad girl camp. She was sent to bad girl camp whenever she was 14. And it was literally in the woods. It was a camp for, bad girls. And so I was like, I would like to talk to you about your experience and what the hell happens at bad girl camp, because that sounds crazy. And then, so I was able to cherry pick who I kind of wanted from those stories, because people sell themselves to you. They're like, hey, I had this crazy experience and I'd love to come on and talk about it. One girl reached out to me and she said, I was 8 months pregnant when I graduated high school and was a teenage mom. And now I'm, in my late 30s, I have 3 kids and I'm married to that boy that got me pregnant in high school. And I was like, I would like to talk to you. I really want to know your story.
Yeah. I don't think I saw that one.
Yeah.
So when you're looking, because in the beginning, I would imagine that it was a little difficult to try to filter that out. But now that as time has gone by, I'm not going to say it's easier, but has it been, I guess easier is the best way I could say it. Has it been easier for you to be able to find a guest that you could feel confident that this person, because you just talked about it, because I think you already answered my question, but I think what I'm trying to really focus on is that is it easier for you to now, because you have people reaching out to you, that that alleviates a lot of the stress where you don't have to look for so many guests now, that more or less some of them are coming out to you, and it's easier in that respect. So having to deal with that, has something changed about how you filter them out in that respect? Because I know you answered the question, but I'm talking about how people say, hey, I have this here, because you talked about that one guest whose episode you didn't air, filtering them out, but then you have another guest and you realize, okay, so I have all these people who I want to talk to. How do I prioritize who can go, who I can talk to first, and who would be the one that I was episode upload in the coming weeks here? Because I'm sure that also becomes another factor for you too.
100%. You know, it's made my life really easy. Social media, TikTok. I can now go to TikTok, look at how they present themselves on video, how they speak to the camera, if they're funny, if they make jokes, if they're doing their own content, if they're doing somebody else's content, like lip syncing over things. The TikTok videos and the reels have made it much easier for me to cyber stalk and then make a decision on whether or not I feel like they would be a good fit for the show. Because if you can present yourself on a video and you can be funny and engaging, and you're just looking at your damn phone and you're funny and engaging, then I can put you on a YouTube video with two other girls that, you know, already have an interaction with each other, and you can be funny and engaging.
Interesting. Well, what about if because so you're doing that kind of vetting there, but what happens if you come across somebody that I guess the question is, have you ever come across somebody that you thought these guys look, or this person looks great on camera, therefore they can offer something when we converse,
and then they sucked.
They're flat.
Oh yeah, I've had two instances now where there's just a very funny person that I was really excited to have on, and then they came on and I was like, okay, you can talk above a whisper, and we can have conversation, and you know, like you make jokes everywhere else, why aren't you making jokes here? And it was really uncomfortable. I was able to salvage that episode though. I had to cut out so much dead air to make it hit harder, but the magic of editing was a beautiful, beautiful thing for that episode. And then I had another person come on that has a very large following on TikTok, on Instagram, and it was like pulling teeth trying to get something. But you don't know, like maybe they were having a bad day that day. Maybe, you know, maybe grandma is in hospice or something. And I'm like, hey, can you come on my show and make jokes? You know, so I try and keep in mind that I don't necessarily know the things that are happening in their lives that particular day. So yeah, sometimes people come on and they totally shit the bed. I try and be forgiving of it, because I'm sure that other people, you know, have me on and they're like, oh God, I thought she was going to be cool and she is terrible.
Well, so let me ask you about this here, because you talked about vetting people out to be on the show. What about when it comes to people asking you to be on their show? Because I've come across a few, but the thing is that I'm curious about what it is about you wanting to be willing to go on someone else's show to converse with them about whatever they want to get into here, that you would feel confident saying, okay, because you've had the experience of being on the opposite spectrum here, but now being asked to be on the show. What's your perception and what's your approach on that for yourself?
You know, I really try and remember that I was a little guy at one point that started a show and really wanted to try and get guests on. I will usually go on a show unless I have something else going on that I cannot, or if it's super political and they're just getting me on because they want to bait me into an argument, I won't do those. But for the most part, I will go on. And that's something that I learned from Brimstone too, is, you know, put your time and energy into people and they're going to remember it. Yeah. And they're going to put their time and energy back into you as well. Right. And if I go on a show and they have 15 downloads for their episode, well, that's 15 people that I got myself in front of that maybe they want to come and check out my show. Maybe one of those people wants to come and check me out, or maybe something that I said in that episode reached one of those people. Because when it really comes down to it, kind of, again, relating to people and getting things out there. Like my favorite message right now is I was 37 years old whenever I started my show. I'm now a 40-year-old woman and I have my shows, both of them, on charts in the US, in Canada, in Germany, in Poland, in New Zealand, in Ireland. It's nice for me to be able to go on and tell people like, hey, I don't give a shit if you're 50. You can still chase your dreams. You can still do big things. Time has not run out for you. So if I get a message out to one person listening to that show, whether the person inviting me on their show has 10 people listening or 10,000 people listening, I think that it's important to put myself out there and put myself in front of people.
But what about, because the thing is, because here's where I'm bringing this up here, because I always I talk to the guests usually after the show, and just to kind of get a feel for how did you think the conversation went, so on. And a lot of times, one thing I remember when I would reach out to somebody is that sometimes I don't hear back from them for a while, maybe a week or two, whatever the case may be. And then later on, sometimes, when they respond back, they'll say, hey, I checked out the show. I checked this out. I like it, whatever. Or I'll find out after the fact, because I had one guest who was on the show recently where they had told me after, once we were done recording, that they checked out my show and they wanted to make sure that I wasn't, like, I guess, a conservative, because I wasn't going to try to pull something out of it because like you just said. And I didn't realize like that was the type of vetting that I was going through for them to say yes to me, because I usually the show is more or less kind of towards entertainment, but I like to talk about anything, not just focusing on one thing. But for yourself though, if someone's reaching out to you, and because I understand you can be really busy, and that's one thing I understand too. Some people just kind of walk in not knowing what they're getting into here. But if you're getting a variety of people reaching out, say, hey, can you be on my show? And you say yes. Do you ever think about yourself? Do I even know what the show is even about before I get on there? Because I want to make sure that I'm not walking into a trap or walking into a conversation that I don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, I get a lot of people like that. I found that a lot of times when people want you to come on their show, they sell themselves right away. So they'll say, hey, my name is, Michael. I have a comedy podcast. We do this, this, and that. Do you want to come on? And so, that kind of helps weed it out, if you will. Like if I know that I'm heading on to a comedy show, the title of the show a lot of times can really give away what they're doing as well. I do vet people, though. I do go on and check them out. A lot of times I'm being invited by like Podmatch or Matchmaker.fm, and there's some other websites out there that people reach out to you and invite you to be guests onto their shows.
Right.
And so I can find the whole description right there on who they are and what they do. I can see reviews from other people that have been on their shows, whether or not it was good or it was fun or they hated it or whatever. So I like to do that. I also will go, depending on how much time I have, like with you, for example. I already knew that you were Brimstone approved. So when you reached out, I was like, oh yeah, sure. No problem. You're Brimstone approved. I know this already. So that was an easy yes for me.
That should be like the catch line, Brimstone approved. All right, we'll bring more people. Yeah. I'd never heard that before. I think it's actually kind of funny. All right. Well, so, you brought something up here that a while back that I wanted to ask you here before. So I hope you don't mind me jumping into this next segment, because I'm going to try to be very careful how I go about this here, because not this is controversial, but I'm being very careful because I don't want to give the impression that the question I'm asking that certain people may be leaning towards this here. But the theme about being the trophy wife, it was meant to be a joke, as you said before, right? But the thing is that there are some shows I have seen that you were on where the first thing they point out is you are so beautiful, and they say all these complimentary things, and a lot of times it's very genuine. They're complimenting you. But sometimes, I'm not gonna say which ones, but there are some I'm like, man, they're really kind of pushing it really hard about your looks, and that kind of becomes a focus for a certain period of time, and then they go on to the other parts of the conversation, but then they kind of reel right back to your looks again. So I guess my question really is about how, because you've talked about before on more than one occasion that, you get direct messages all the time from guys who are sending you pictures of themselves, among other things too. And, you found a way to handle that for yourself, but then having to deal with the various other ways that guys would talk to you, in this capacity here, where they may not be saying these things to you, like in that respect, but they're saying something that kind of pushes that envelope, if you will, to kind of more or less be in that borderline where they're not saying it, but they're saying it. And I'm wondering how you go about that for yourself. Because even then when I'm watching certain interviews, and I'm not saying it was like that for everyone. I'm not saying that,
Oh, right.
but when I did notice, at least that's how it looked to me, that the impression I guess you handle yourself very well. You just keep, that conversation moving forward and kind of just say something and move on, and then, keep the momentum going.
Yeah.
But having to deal with that in that capacity, where it's not a form of a critique, but it's definitely a form of like a compliment, where they're kind of, you can kind of tell they're leaning towards that, that more or less the derogatory path, if you will. So I'm curious about how you handle that for yourself now. And then when you first came across it and realized that, how was that like for you in the beginning?
I really try and not put too much weight into it. I think a lot of times whenever I go on to some people's shows, they don't know what to expect from me right away. And so their default is to like talk about the thing that's right in front of you. Oh, and I'm right in front of them. So that's what they kind of default to. And so I just, like you said, move the conversation along. I'm like, come for the looks, stay for the jokes, just keep pushing along. Say something funny really quick. Like you hook them with the looks, and then you really drive it home with the jokes.
Oh, that's funny. I like that one. I like that answer. Well, so, but even now, as the years have gone by for yourself, because does your perception change about how you look at yourself, hearing people saying these complimentary things about you, both men and women, where some people will probably say, hey, I would love to have you as my trophy wife, or hey, I would love to do these things here with you. Has that changed in how you conduct yourself, whether it be in person or, in this kind of conversation here where we're through Zoom, but because even then, when I look at some of the previous interviews you've done, I'm not sure if I can say it's fair for me to say, but I've noticed that how you would handle it before one conversation where that was brought up, and then the next one, it seems like, you've got the rhythm going. You're able to move quickly to kind of diverge into another angle of the conversation. So that I did notice there, but I'm wondering, like, if you're having to deal with that often, and if you do have to deal with that often, how have you developed the callous to say, all right, that one to step away and one to know how to put up the walls, if you will?
I think that I've just really started leaning into the participation part of it. And I do that because I'm getting older. I'm 40, I got the lines are coming on the face. And so I appreciate the compliments when people give them to me. It's nice to hear, and I'm like, oh, thank you. But also, here's some jokes. I'm also funny because I am not going to have skin elasticity forever. Gravity has raged its war already. So I don't know that I necessarily changed the way that I deal with it. I think maybe it's just an inside thing where I've recognized already, okay, well, it's every second that goes by, you just keep getting a little bit older, a little bit older, a little bit older. You're slipping a little further away from that skin elasticity that you had in your 20s. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to do some research on you, because it's stated on your Instagram and Twitter that you are a comedian. I couldn't find any stand-up of online here for you.
So I have a show coming up on the 14th, I think it's the 14th of August. So I'm really excited about that. I just started comedy not too long ago. Most of my comedy has been through improv. I do a lot of improv and through my shows, and I'm going to stand up. I've been writing my set for like 6 weeks now. So August 14th, I'm really excited about it.
How long is the set supposed to be for yourself?
So the first show, it's like a group of us going up. I think we each have 5-minute sets, and then from there you build, and it's 10-minute opener, and then you build from there. So we'll see what happens. I'm really excited about my stand-up right now, though.
When you were booking the gig, was it easier for you to book a spot for you to be able to do a stand-up show, or was it because here's the thing, because I'm actually really curious about you, because this is pretty much from what I'm imagining your first official stand-up show, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So here's my question to you then, because I've actually talked to several people about this where, you know, I brought up in the past where social media changed the landscape for a lot of people, where the guys
Mm-hmm.
who are not comedians, but they have a huge following on YouTube or whatever, and a comedian who is a veteran for years and years and years, who is, a legend, they would go out to a comedy club and the comedy owner would probably, or the club owner would probably say, oh, well, yeah, sure, I know who you are, but how many followers you have in social media? I was like, I have, 20,000, whatever. Oh yeah, we can probably book you next week. But then some YouTuber will come up and say, hey, I want to book a gig. Is how many followers you have? I got 5 minutes. We'll book you tonight. There's a
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
difference when it comes to the approach in there. So for yourself, when you came out there, was that one of the questions they asked of you? Like, hey, how many followers you have on social media? And if they did, what was the response when you told them what your numbers were?
So I actually had people reaching out to me all the time. Hey, I got a gig in Hollywood. Come
Oh,
do
okay.
some stand up. Hey, I'm doing this. Come do stand up. Hey, and I would reply to these people and be like, yo, I don't do stand up. And then finally I was like, what don't I do stand up? So, and that's whenever I went and, I started a class basically. And so the class that I went to, and, you get up there every week, I'm up in front of people doing stand up. The class is basically an open mic with feedback. You go up there, you workshop
Mm.
your material, they give you feedback on it, or you could add this, or you could do that, or how about this joke, or
So like a producer,
and
basically.
yes.
Okay.
So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 weeks. And so it wasn't, I mean, everybody that is in that class is doing this stand-up gig also.
Mhm.
It's like a student show kind of a thing. So I didn't actually have to ask them to do it. They just kind of handed it to me. They're like, here you go. Just go ahead
Interesting.
up there. But open mics, I think, is probably the most important thing that I need to really start doing. Go get out there with some open mics. I have a lot of comedian friends that are up on stage all the time, always telling me, like, hey, come and do this with me and come and do that. I've just been too much of a puss to do it. So now that I've had a little experience up on a stage in front of people, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
So what was the reason for a lot of these clubs reaching out to? Like, were they reaching out to because of of your platform? Did they notice the amount of followers you have on social media? What was the incentive for them to say, hey, we want you to come and do a gig here out for us at this spot, whatever the date may be?
I think a lot of the show, a lot of people that listen to the show that were in stand up were asking me to come. I've interviewed a lot of stand up
Right.
comedians. So that probably had something to do with it also. And then just my straight out, like, you make tweets about things, people think it's funny. It makes its rounds with like the meme world. And um, so I think that also, like, they read your comedy and ask you to come do stand up. So many people assumed that I was already doing stand up, and I was like, no, 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 I will shit my pants. Like, I am not getting up on a stage in front of people. I will do the thing where I can edit everything, but standing up in front of people and being like, hey, laugh at my jokes felt very vulnerable to me.
Hmm.
But I think people reached out mostly probably because of the show and because of all of the comedians that I had already interviewed.
So with the that workshop class you went to where you were testing out your material,
Hmm.
did I'm not sure how it's actually set up in that respect, because I'm not sure if it's just like you standing on a stage and you're having like three teachers saying that was good and try this, or is it more like this is going to be an actual stand up gig that you're doing, but we're all here to give you tips. So I'm
It
wondering how
it
that
was a
approach was.
class full of people. So
Okay.
it's a class full of people and the teachers, and you stand up in front. It's like an open mic to a bar of 15 people.
Okay. So how do you think? I mean, because I'm curious if you actually envision yourself out there and how you would conduct yourself and approach it. Because I'm assuming you're practicing and how you're going to go about it, and delivering the punchline and
Uh-huh.
getting to the punchline. Do you feel confident that it could go really really well
I
considering what
do.
you've okay?
I
So,
do. I'm a person that records myself because I want to
okay.
see my mannerisms. I want to see if I'm saying like too much, which I am, by the way. I realized that in my last video. So
I do
I
too.
like to see myself on the stage. I kind of mimic other comics in my head with their confidence and how they work the stage and how they I've learned patience in comedy is really, really good. Your timing and your delivery and not just speeding through things. There's so many things to learn, the ins and outs of comedy. But at the risk of sounding egotistical as fuck, I watched my own stand up and I was like, oh shit, girl, you're not too bad.
That's funny. Okay, well, let me answer this here, and I hope you don't mind me asking this question because I generally do want to know how you're going about this here. Because there's actually a two-part question for this. So the first thing is that what happens if you bomb? How would you? Because to me, you sound like you are preparing for that. That okay, if this doesn't work out, at least for that stand up or for that show, I meant to say, are you prepared about? So I'm going to find out what I need to work on, how I'm going to go handle this here, so that way the next time I come back, I'll be better. Or let's say if it works out in where people respond to it immediately and they say, this is really, really good. Do you have more material? And if you say, yes, I do actually have this amount of time that I can do, perfect. Now we're going to kind of bump you up here. The reason I'm asking these two questions here is because it's, every comedian, it goes through a bombing session, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's very, very rare, extremely rare, where a comedian comes on stage and then boom, they've hit them. They're on point, and people respond very well. And then maybe they kind of have that momentum lost a little bit because things have changed along the way. It's standard, but if you notice that if things are going to work well for you in that capacity, have you thought about, okay, so if this does go somewhere, what about the other endeavors you have going on that you are more likely going to see that this could affect, where, you have the 3 shows you're doing here. And then let's say a guest, are you being booked on a show for you to be a guest on, where all of a sudden now, by the way, there's a possibility I may have to cancel because I have a gig booked this night and I'm not going to make the show. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen like that, but if it were to happen, how do you go about handling the opposite spectrum of, not working out, but getting back on the horse again, and then working out and having to see the different variations of issues that or problems that may come with that along the way?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm kind of hoping for. That's the goal, right? Like
Right.
I want it to be something that works out. I am overly accepting of the fact that I'm going to bomb. Like I am. You have to. As a comedian, you have to bomb. If you're not bombing, you're not workshopping your material. You're not figuring out what hits and what doesn't hit. And so I am comfortable with the bombing thing, especially because I've been on many shows before. There are jokes that I have told that didn't get a single, like, not even a grin, and you're like, oh, well, guess that wasn't funny. So I'm already comfortable with that. I hope that I'm able to take it to another level. I do think that that is something that I kind of want to grow into, especially, again, that whole looks thing. I'm getting older. This is all stuff that I was too afraid to do whenever I was younger. And now I have this life experience and, that trauma that makes you really funny. So I'm trying to use that to kind of grow into the future, because that's what I hope to be able to lean on, is my personality, my comedic chops. So we'll see what happens. And hopefully I have good enough time management skills where I don't have to cancel on people.
So for you though, what's really the end game about everything that you're doing? Because you're stepping into comedy, or stand-up comedy, I meant to say, where there's a probably going to be a good chance that this could take off, and because I'm not sure at the end of the day what really is your goal. I mean, you shared what your goals are, but as far as yourself is concerned, going through this journey here, where you're having several shows that are doing really well, where people are responding to them and you're getting feedback and you're getting requests, if you will. But then if you go down this avenue, I mean, I'm not sure what your goal in mind is, having all these different activities that you do. I'm not sure if activity is the right word to use, but I think you understand what I mean. But
yeah,
if what's really the goal in mind that you have, having to pursue all these variations of passions you have that you've developed throughout the years?
my end goal is truly to keep adding to the resume. I want to keep adding to the resume. I want my children and my family and myself to recognize that I was a late ass bloomer. I did not start anything. I didn't have the confidence to do anything for so long. And now that I have dabbled and I've grown and I've started to see like the fruits of my labor, and that, you know, you don't have to be a perfect this or a perfect 10 or a perfect that or anything to be a successful human being. And also, mistakes make you super relatable. All of the shit that I've ever gone through in my life makes me relatable to a lot of people. And so the goal is to hopefully be that person that says like, oh, I really wanted to start acting, but, you know, I'm 40 and I don't know if I can do it. And then somebody says, well, you know, Dayna Pereira didn't start her stand up until she was 40 and look at her now. You know, that's kind of, I think that that would be a really cool thing, because people say all the time, like, well, Samuel L. Jackson didn't start until he was this age, and Paula Deen didn't get on TV until she was in her 50s. And there's this whole roster of people that didn't start until they were later in age. And I would really like to be a part of that, because I think too many people think that life ends after a certain amount of time. They think that, you know, once you have crow's feet, you have to fucking lay down in the coffin and just like go to sleep until you reincarnate or some shit. So I think that it's important to remind people that you can be 40, you can be 50, you can be 60, you can be 70. Doesn't matter. Do what you want to do. Do what makes you happy. And I plan on doing it until I'm no longer wanting to, until it's a pain in the ass and I don't want to do it anymore.
What's something about yourself that you probably didn't like about yourself that you start to appreciate more as the years have gone by?
Yeah, well, if we're talking like physically or
No, I'm just more. I've never crossed my mind to ask about physically.
Well, because I talk out the side of my mouth and I hate it. Like the way that my mouth moves. Whenever I first started watching myself on video, I was like, oh my God, turn it off. Ew, why didn't you tell me I looked like that?
No. Yeah. No, I'm not referring to that. I'm just referring to about your, like, I guess, you know, traits of your personality, hobbies, or, you know, the ways that you conduct yourself in certain situations that, you know, you probably didn't like yourself before about. And then as the years have gone by, you felt more comfortable and probably more happier about how you go about these things, whereas before you weren't too happy about it.
Yeah, there's a lot about my personality that I didn't like. And I think that because I was such an angry person, like the person that I am now is night and day from the person that I was a decade ago. And it took a lot of self-reflection and therapy and growth and maturity. And I'm not done yet. There's still things about myself that I'm like, ugh. Like, for example, I am overwhelmed easily with people. Like there are times where my 16-year-old will say, Mom, can I have a friend over? And I'm like, oh my God, I just can't deal with another person in the fucking house right now. Like, can we, like I have these panic attacks almost whenever, and I have to do one of two things. One, I have to suck it up and say, okay, I'm going to take my energy into another room and you can hang out here. And, or I ask them to like, can you keep it to your room or can you keep it outside or something like that? Things that I really accept about myself now are the things that tormented me and put me in such a bad mood and a bad place because I would beat myself up over it. Like the fact that I, you know, was having a hard day and I didn't want to be around a lot of people that day. I would feel bad that my son couldn't have his friend over and I'd beat myself up over it. And then I would be upset about that. So then I would be grouchy with everybody. I'd be grouchy with my kid. I'd be grouchy with my husband. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I know that I have days where I have to be introverted to protect my energy. I'm more forgiving of myself for that. And I've found that being open with my kids about it or my husband, what have you, that they are more understanding about it too. So all that time that I spent back in the day just beating myself up about it and keeping it inside and then just becoming grouchy, I've turned into this open communication with my family and my friends too, because there are times where they're like, hey, come to this party. And I'm like, I really can't do it. Like, I just don't have the energy because I get depleted so quickly. And then there are other times where I want to be around a million people and I want to talk to everybody and I want to hear all their stories and I want to be out for hours on end. There's two different versions of me, and accepting that I am both of those people and being open about it and communicating about it, whatever version of my personality you're going to get that day, I think has really, really helped along the way and has helped me become more accepting of myself and turn it into a positive thing.
So this is I'm curious about what you just said there, but I'm going to lean more towards the interview side of that you do, because I'm wondering if when you interview somebody on your show or on the various shows you're on, does that help? How do you have you figured out, okay, so now that I've done this and communicate with this person, I know I can actually do it and I can use it in, with my family and with my friends. Whereas before I more or less struggled with that, because that's one thing about what I do here, that I noticed that, at least for myself, when I first started doing here, because I knew I wanted to do it, but I was kind of green about how I wanted to go about it. And then as time has gone by, I not say I'm great, but I definitely know I've gotten better.
Yeah.
But for yourself, though, when you started doing that and then progressed from there, did you notice about how your communication skill has differed from when you were on the show and how that reflects in your own personal life, if you will?
100%.
Okay.
Being able to sit and listen to people and, quite frankly, learn from people, because that's what we're doing in our interviews, right? We're hearing them, we're listening to them, we're learning about them. It made me more observant and aware in real life. I've found that I am a much better listener whenever I have that interview side of me coming out. Now I'm in conversations. I'm not talking because I want you to, to hear me speak. I'm asking questions because I want to hear them speak. I went on a wine tasting tour with my husband one time, and I was talking to the winemaker and to the people that we were on the tour with. And this guy stopped me and he was like, "You're really good, like, about learning about people." And I was like, "Thank you." Like,
It's probably one of the best comments you got, right?
Yes, it was such a nice thing to say. And I think it's really helpful in life to be able to ask questions and hear the answers. It's helped in my parenting. I stop and listen. I'm not just like going 100% like, you have to listen to what I say. I'm like, okay, this is what I feel. Now tell me how you feel about it. And so this show, the shows that I've done, the ones that I go on to and the ones where I'm the interviewer and I'm learning about people, has really, really helped me in my everyday life, because it just makes you a better person when you're able to actually really listen and hear what people are saying to you.
When you started doing this here, apart from what you just said right now, where you learned to become a better listener and things of that nature, but what's one thing about yourself that you realize that you should really struggle with in that form of communication that you feel you've gotten better with?
I think as a person that I was always so worried about what other people thought of me, through all of this, I've learned now that I can talk, and whatever I say is going to be accepted by people. And maybe they don't always agree with me, but I found that the things that I'm feeling inside that I end up talking about, a lot of people are feeling inside and want to talk about. And that was a big realization for me going through the whole process, on the shows and in regular life again, is like, oh, the things that I was afraid to talk about before, now I get to talk about them. And I'm no longer afraid of who's going to be judging me. Instead, I'm thinking, wow, somebody out there is going to hear this and they're going to be like, yep, me too.
Do you ever, I hope that you don't mind this question here, because do you ever listen to conversations you've had on the shows that you've been on to see how you conduct yourself in that conversation? That's where you're not in control. Well, I wouldn't say not in control, but you're not you're not the conductor, if you will, in the conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, most like if I like to give people their views and their listens and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So whenever I am on a show, I like to promote it. I'll go on and watch some of it or listen to it. Or so I do get to hear myself in some of those conversations. And so many times I'm like, ugh, I wish I would have said this instead. Or man, that was dumb. Or, like things like that. But then you just realize, no, that's just who you are. That's it. Take it or that's just who you are. You just get over it.
So, because there's a question I really want to ask, but I'm trying to see how I can ask it without making it seem bad. But when you listen to some of those conversations you've on,
Mhm.
I kind of touched on before about how certain people may approach the conversation a certain way, given your looks. But when you listen to those conversations, and I'm not sure if you listen to the whole thing, because a lot of times it happens at the very beginning. But if you listen to that, does your perception change about this conversation probably didn't turn, at the moment it seemed like this, but now that I'm listening it's completely different from what I perceived it to be while I was in the moment. Like I'm wondering if you have little moments like that when you listen and you realize that it wasn't what I thought it was when I was going through that at the time.
I don't think I've really had that experience. I think most of the time, whenever I'm listening back, because I do a lot of comedy shows. So there's a lot of, comedy people that I really enjoy listening back to, or I get excited about being on their shows and stuff like that. There are times though where I listen back or I've been on a show or two and I feel like, oh, like some people invite you on their show, but they don't want to hear what you have to say. They invite you on the show so that they can have you retweet their link or repost or so that they can say that they had you on your show, but then they just want to talk the entire time. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit here and listen to you then. You let me
Yeah.
know when you have a question.
Yeah. I know, man. What you're talking about. Yeah. Trust me, I know.
Yeah.
When it comes to the shows that you're doing, I'm wondering if some things have changed for you along the way when it comes to the business side of it here that I'm not saying you're not were aware of it, but because this is a different type of business where podcast is now a thing, but when at the time you got into it here, it was starting to become more popularized here. But now
Mm-hmm.
that you've gone through that you know, being a part of that engine, if you will, if how you look at the industry, if you will, has changed for you about where you realize that this is not what I was expecting, whether it be good, bad, indifferent, whatever the case may be, that you feel like that it what you were preparing for was not something you expected.
I didn't expect well, two things with that. One, I've realized that I am really, really bad at asking for things for myself. Like when it comes to marketing or it comes to asking for, money or stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I'm so bad at it. I am not like the business minded person at
Mm.
all whenever it comes to stuff like that. But what was the other part of the question? Because I just spaced on what I was going to say.
So I think because I have to reflect because that's one of my biggest problems here that because that's a long question. So I think the question I was asking was that how the things that you were preparing for in this case the podcasting field where you knew how you may want to approach the business, but the things that came up along the way, you realize, okay, this was not what I expected, and what I was anticipating was
Okay.
this,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing is not what I expected. I, thought like, oh, maybe I would have, some listeners here and there, or, but I feel like I got lucky whenever I started. My social media really, really helped with growing the show. And so I didn't expect that I'd be doing it for this long. I started it in 2020. It's
Mm.
2.5 years now that I've been doing the show, some of it by myself, some of it with co-hosts. And I did not expect the amazing community of people that it comes with. I've made so many friends through podcasting, people that I am thrilled to support and that support me back. There are people that I've met through podcasting that support me more than my own family does. Like I have people that will communicate or retweet my things or post about my show or review my show or whatever that my own mother doesn't do. So it's amazing to me how a group of strangers can be so supportive of each other. And that wasn't something that I expected. All of the relationships that I've come out with through podcasting has been incredible. Amazing friendships. I mean, I met Brimstone 2 years ago now, and I'm like, damn, like I'm so happy that I was able to meet him. And now we get to do a show together and it's so much fun. And I've like made a truly good friend out of it. And same with Samantha on Where's Our Participation Trophy.
Yeah.
She's so smart. My God, that woman's brain is sexy as fuck. And she's so beautiful and she's so funny. And I'm like, man, I just hit the jackpot with these people. I just feel so lucky to have gotten to, invade the same space as some of these people. And I did not expect that would be like something that I was so incredibly grateful for.
What's the biggest fear that you have about this endeavor you're going through here where you, I mean, I'm sure the most answers will probably be like, it may not work out, but like, what's aside from that, what's a fear that you have that that you are afraid that you would not be prepared to truly handle?
My biggest fear when it comes to podcasting is saying something that is taken out of context that gets me into, because sometimes, whenever you're trying to think of something and your brain's not catching up with your mouth and, so I'm always like, shit, like, did I say that in the right way where I'm not offending somebody because I don't want to, or even, something that maybe I thought was fine to say because I was raised a certain way, or, just so many things. Like, I have a joke about Old Gringo that I have written into my stand-up. And I had to stop and go, am I allowed to say Old Gringo? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that or not.
Well, Gringo is a white person, though.
It is, yeah. So I think that I'm safe, but it was like, I had to stop and reflect on it and like ask questions about it because I was like, fuck, am I allowed to do that? I'm just not sure. And in today's context, you never know what you're getting in trouble for. So I definitely feel like sometimes I have to tiptoe around things. And it's a big fear of mine that I will ignorantly say something that is inappropriate or hurt somebody.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Because I've had, it's one of the reasons why I always talk to the guests after the fact, because I always ask them, was there anything you said that you want me to ruin? And I've had a few say, take this part out. Because it's going to be taken out of context. So, I mean, not to have any problem. And I understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And there's like minutes that I'm taking out because there's that one little thing, but the lead up to that conversation takes everything, so I have to find a way how to maneuver around. So this is where this conversation started, but where the conversation ended up going into flows so well. So I now have to remove everything in order for me to splice it together to make it coherent. And it's not a fault of theirs. I'm not blaming them at all by any means, because I completely understand where they're coming from.
Right.
But that is something that I've noticed a lot more now, where people are talking to me and they say, this cancel culture is very, very real. And anything that I say can affect me. And I don't want, I'm treading on water here to make sure that I don't say anything that will ruin my chances here. And I have my opinions on the cancel culture here, but it sucks is what I would say here. But
it does. And I'm definitely not a person that says take anything out, because I'm pretty easygoing with stuff like that.
Right.
I think it leads to another conversation where we get to allow people to make mistakes and grow from those mistakes. Like, teach me if I'm saying something that I shouldn't be saying, or if I made an assumption that I shouldn't have done, or I stereotyped, or I did this, or I did that. I would hope that somebody would be like, all right, let's use this as a teaching situation rather than a let's fucking cancel you situation.
But I think it's more scary too, because everything is amplified now because of social media, because the guys that you would never meet, at the comfort of their own home, they're literally just saying all these things. And that starts tacking on where you probably would only hear from 15 people within, the vicinity where you're at. And then all of a sudden nationwide, you have thousands upon millions upon people who are saying more or less the same thing. And you're not even sure if it's even legitimate, because are they just kind of tagging along for the ride, or do they really do believe those things? And that's the part that I really have a big problem with, because I'm not even sure half the people who say those things really believe, or if they're better yet, they didn't even do the research.
I had a guy ask me onto their show, and he was super nice. And then I get there, and he was just everything I said. He came back with something else and something else. And he was like the biggest dick. And I handled him well. I was like, whatever. And I kind of ignored him. So I didn't let him bait me into any arguments. But when we were done recording the show, he was like, sorry, I had to do that. It's part of my personality. Like it's part of his like persona that he made up for the show. And I was like, yo, that was unnecessary.
Yeah. And that's one, because that's one of the reasons why. So here, so I'm glad you brought that up here, because that's one thing about shows that I've come across, especially as of late, when it comes to YouTube shows, podcasts, whatever the case may be. I'm noticing a lot more of that now, where there is a persona. And I'll be honest, there are some people who, like, for example, I talked to a Twitch streamer by the name of Natalia Hawthorne, who hosts called Comedy Cinema. She openly admits that, what I do on the show is me, but it's slightly heightened because I want to make it entertaining so that when you watch it, it's engaging. And I understand what she's coming, but I had the time to speak with her about that for me to fully understand where she was coming from. And not to say when I watched it before, I was like, this seems like bullshit. It wasn't that, because I liked what she was doing, which is why I asked her to be on the show. But the thing is that some people have that perception where they got to take it, another notch or two because of, they want to make it presentable to have to sell something. And I'm wondering, what exactly are they selling here?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for me now to look past those things, because it's, if I have to question, is it even real to begin with here? More likely I'm not going to be interested in pursuing it there, because I don't, you can filter out the bullshit really quickly here nowadays because it's all out there. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I think a lot of people may forget it still exists out there. But here's what I'm actually curious with you, because when you start talking to a lot of people, especially who are becoming fans of what you do, whether you meet them in person, online, or whatever the case may be, do they have a perception about you, how they look at you, where they think what you're doing is more or less a persona?
Sometimes I think they do. And then, my first day of my improv class that I walked in, and the first thing I did was go, how are you? And what's your name? And I was just like, talking to everybody. And I think a couple weeks later, we were all pretty comfortable with each other. And somebody was like talking about somebody that was shy, and they were like, oh, you mean Dayna? And everybody was laughing, because clearly I am not the shy one. I was the one that was in there just bullshitting all the time. But I think people do have a certain expectation whenever they meet me. And it's, usually that I'm walking in with a fucking Gucci bag or something. And the fact of the matter is I shop at Marshall's. So it's like, I do not. So for sure, definitely people have, they think that there's a certain persona that's going on. But, then they get to know me a little bit, and they quickly learn that, no, it's just who I am all the time. It's, I enjoy conversations, and I also get very exhausted too. So I don't want to make myself sound like an introvert too much. I'm an extroverted introvert, if that makes sense. Like I can go out.
Yeah.
And I can be the life of the party and have so much fun. And I love to be around people. And then I want to go home and sit in my house for a week.
So you went out with a bang and you need to recover.
Yes, the recovery time for sure. That's what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess in this case here, this would be a good time to kind of close off here, because, I'll be frank with you. When I reached out to you, I'm not saying that I had a perception of you. That's not what I'm getting at here, but I definitely had I felt like there was a lot more that I wanted to learn more about you that I'm not, and hope you don't take it wrong when I say so, that I don't necessarily get from the shows. You do. I'm a fan of what you do. So I hope it doesn't come out the wrong way here, but when I hear you talk, because the show is on a subject matter and it stays consistent with that.
Yes.
But there are times where, what about these other things that I want to hear you talk about here? That's what I'm more focusing on, which is why when I was listening to your conversations with other guests that you have, or you're a guest on other shows here, it was pretty consistent in that respect where, how did you get started? So I felt like there was something that I wouldn't say missing, but I felt like I want to delve into more here with you because, there's a lot more than meets the eyes. What is with anybody here, but with you in particular, there's something more that I felt like there's a lot more to your story that, I've heard about here, but I'm more interested in like the inner journey, if you will, because you talked about your external journey, but I'm more interested in the inner journey that you deal with here, which is why I was focused on these questions, because I want to hear about your perspective on those variations of your life. So the fact that you've been able to open up here with me about that, in which I was confident that was going to be the case here, but I was really curious to see what your responses were going to be, because honestly, I did not know where that would lead into here. So I was quite genuinely surprised to hear you give me these responses where seeing the hardships and the variations of those hardships that comes with it, and then the expectations that you may have about these future endeavors you want to go through here, and what you expect if it fails or if it doesn't, or if it works out, how you would handle yourself. That part to me is more interesting than the actual success. I mean, yes, I want you to be successful. Don't get me wrong, but if it doesn't work out, how would you handle that here? And I want to ask that now before you get to that point. That's the part, is the little moment that I think are really important to highlight here. So I hope that, with what I was able to ask of you here, that whoever comes across and listens to this here, they get to know more about you in another area where they probably weren't too familiar with you before because of what you've done on a consistent basis here. So I know by the time this uploads here, I know you mentioned before that you're going to be doing a stand-up gig on the 14th. Is that the time frame that you're expecting, or is that kind of you're not sure if that's the actual date that you're going to have the show be?
I'm pretty sure it's the 14th, if I'm remembering correctly in my brain. It's the 14th.
Are you able to say where it's going to be at though at this time, or are you still kind
of? It is at Mic Drop Comedy in San Diego. It's a matinee show, so everybody day drink. It's a Sunday fun day, so you can day drink and then come laugh at me, whether I am bombing or I am nailing.
And are there anything that you can also at least announce now that people can be looking out for as far as any upcoming projects that would be that would be in the works that people can be anticipating here that you were able to touch upon?
Yeah, we have some really fun stuff going on with Where's Our Participation Trophy. That is a podcast that I host with Sam G. And then also, I mean, Brim and I are always trying to get together. Whether or not we're able to get together, time will tell. We have big ideas on things that we want to happen.
Yeah.
Now we just need to make them happen, because with me and Brim, and with me and Sam G, we are on opposite coasts of each other.
Right.
So the Dirty Little Secrets Club is chugging along. Brim will never let me quit. I'm going to be doing the Dirty Little Secrets Club when I'm 80 years old. And and with Where's Our Participation Trophy, we have a couple of deals in the works that we should hopefully be able to talk about soon. So exciting things happening, but I would just love the support. If you guys want to go and listen to some Dirty Little Secrets, go to the Dirty Little Secrets Club. If you want to submit a dirty little secret, you can do it anonymously at thedirtylittlesecretsclub.com. We love the rate and reviews. We love the comments on YouTube. All of those little things that you can do to support your favorite podcasters.
So on that note, we'll go and close out here, and I'll be sure to have all the links in the description below for anyone to look out for that as well, to follow you there. But again, I want to say thank you so much for giving me your time here, because I know you're busy, and the fact you've given me these 2 hours, almost 2 hours here, this was actually a lot of fun for me, and I was anticipating a great conversation. I got an even greater one here, so I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for giving me time.
Yes, I had a great time. Thank you.
Well, thanks again.